Hi guys, I'm Kristen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing a few authors that I would like to read more books from. In honor of S.A. Chakraborty's announcement on Twitter and Instagram this week that the first book in her new High Seas pirate-inspired fantasy series is coming out next March in 2023, I thought it would be a great idea to talk about some other authors, including S.A. Chakraborty, of course, that I would love to read more books from. Now, some of these are authors that I have already read one or more books from them that I'd like to keep reading or I'd like to read more from them. And I also have a couple authors that I haven't read any books from them before, but I'm really interested to start. So let's jump into it. I'm going to start with the authors that I have already read at least one or more books from them before, and that I would really like to read more or check further back into their back catalog. Now, I might as well start with S.A. Chakraborty herself, and this is of course the author of the Devabad series, beginning with the book City of Brass. I read this series a couple years ago now, I guess in 2020, with my local fantasy book club, and my whole book club absolutely fell in love with this series. I loved the fresh new fantasy setting of a Middle Eastern inspired world, exploring the Jinn and our main character who travels to the Jinn city of Devabad. And I absolutely loved the character work that took place over the course of that trilogy. But in particular, the thing that I think I loved the most, or that surprised me the most about that series, was how well S.A. Chakraborty handled the religious conflict within this world. And because we're dealing with such a long-living species as the Jinn, even though certain events or tragedies or genocides took place millennia ago, it still feels really relevant to the people of Devabad, or to the Jinn of Devabad. Over the course of the trilogy and in the past, both sides of this conflict have done pretty horrible things, but it never felt like S.A. Chakraborty was villainizing any particular side, while at the same time managing to not make it feel like she was excusing any particular atrocity that had occurred. I just felt like she really found this fine balance of exploring the religious conflict and showing that both sides are doing bad things, and you can always understand each side and what they're doing or why they did it, even though you don't necessarily agree with one side or the other. You can never essentially find anything that you wholeheartedly, or any side that you can wholeheartedly agree with, that it's like, yes, these guys were always in the right, because that's just not the case. And I feel like that was a very realistic thing that she did in the writing of this series, and something that I absolutely really appreciated. She also in that series had one of the most well-written villains I have ever had the chance of reading. I can't even say who it is because it is a spoiler. So I know I can't be the only reader to be so excited to read more from Shannon Chakraborty. I cannot wait to see what she does with the new series, The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. Now, another author that I have read from before that I cannot wait to read more books from is Teaking Fisher. I read A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking just recently, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I think it's like a new favorite, cozy, fun, enjoyable read. I found the humor just so fun and quirky and different. And I've heard that Teaking Fisher's kind of quirky humor, like a little bit dark bent to it, is something that she does in a lot of her books, and it's something that I absolutely love when authors do. In fact, as I'm saying these words, it's making me think a little bit of another author whose works I describe this way, and that's Margaret Owen, the author of the Merciful Crows duology and Little Thieves. And I know so many other readers recently who have picked up Teaking Fisher books for the first time and absolutely gone on a bit of a binge, including my friend Taylor, who read Paladin's Grace, I believe, and then went on a serious Teaking Fisher binge. I feel like Teaking Fisher is getting a lot of notice right now with the releases of her books Nettle and Bone. I believe she also has a horror novel that came out recently, or that's coming out, so I'll put that up. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. And I just really like the possibility that I feel with Teaking Fisher, where it is something that immediately gripped me. I had such a great time. I can see the potential of what she has with her writing just from reading A Wizard's Guide to Baking, which is like a sort of middle grade / YA fantasy about a girl with baking magic who has to save a city. But just everything that the author did in that story, impressed me, I think. Impressed me and made me so interested to see what else they could do, because I am certain that they could do so many different things so well just based on the limited sample of her writing that I have seen so far. I'm absolutely planning to pick up more books by this author. I know they have a pretty big back catalog, so I'm really looking forward to that. And as I mentioned in my last video, if you are also interested in reading more Teaking Fisher books, I think you should head over to my friend Sarah's channel, Bright and Bookish. I will link their channel down below. Subscribe, get notifications, and stay tuned for some news there. And then the final author that I wanted to include that is an author that I have previously read some of their books before is Anthony Ryan. This is the author of Bloodsong and the Raven Shadow series that I have read the first 2 books in. Now this is an author and like a series and a book that I absolutely loved when I read it, but it's one that I almost always like forget about a little bit, but it's one that I think about recommending to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, even though it's like a very particular tone and vibe, which is like, you know, morally upstanding, good guy, kind of pretty good at everything, main character Valen, who joins like a religious military order. But for whatever reason, when I'm like thinking about what books I want to pick up, it's never that next one, or it's never another series. I think that he has like a continuation series after Raven Shadow called Raven Blood. And I believe there's another series as well, and one that is in the works right now. But when I think back about having read Bloodsong and even Tower Lord, which I know wasn't as well liked, I just think it was such a positive experience. I felt like his characterization of Valen and the like buddy group, or what were those called, like the brotherhood that was in that story, and the way that Valen affects and touches other people's lives within this world. I just absolutely loved that writing, and it felt like a very atmospheric kind of a read when I was reading it, but it's something that's like maybe a little bit more like gritty and wintry and dark, and it's a little bit more military than I think what I usually pick up. However, as I'm saying, I do really want to read more by Anthony Ryan because of how positive of an experience Bloodsong and Tower Lord were for me. So this is a little bit of a reminder for myself to prioritize finishing Raven Shadow so that I can pick up more other books by Anthony Ryan. I know that he is in the middle of releasing a series right now called the Covenant of Steel series. The first book, The Pariah, came out last year, and the second book in the series, The Martyr, is coming out next week, actually on June 28th. Okay, now for some new to me authors that I have not picked up any of their books yet, but I've been hearing their books mentioned so often by other channels and other readers that I am so intrigued to check those authors' works out for the first time. And one thing that really got me excited when I was putting together this short list is that each of these 3 authors have a pretty extensive back catalog. So if I pick up the first one and love it, there is so much more potential or like room to pick up more and more books from them moving forward. So I'll start off with the first author here, and that is Nevo. I feel like this is mostly Sarah from the channel Voyage Through Worlds who's influencing my decision on this one, but I do have other friends, including Sarah from Bright and Bookish and Kristen from Kristen's Craves Books, who have also talked about Nevo's works lately with really, really positive comments. Now, one thing that really caught my eye when people talk about Nevo's works is the beautiful writing and storytelling with a surprising amount of character depth on top of that. And those are like all pretty big buzzwords for me. Now, the reason why I haven't picked up one of Nevo's books yet is because their 2 most recent full-length novel releases have both been set in like a 1920s era inspired like our world but with magical realism. Now, I don't read a ton of magical realism, but it's not necessarily a turnoff. However, 1920s setting kind of is. I absolutely love that aesthetic visually, but for whatever reason, when I am reading synopses or even reading books from that time period, I'm just like not as into it. But because of that, I haven't picked up those 2 novels. So I think where I would start is probably one of the 2 novellas, either The Empress of Salt and Fortune or When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, which are both East Asian inspired fantasy settings. And then if I absolutely fall in love with the writing, I am definitely willing to give Siren Queen a go. The Gatsby retelling and The Beautiful and the Chosen Ones, less so of a draw for me. The second totally new to me author that I would like to check out is Karen Lord, who writes a pretty broad mix of genres and things, I think. It's definitely Angela from the channel Literature Science Alliance who has inspired me or influenced me on this one. Angela talks about Karen Lord's books all the time, absolutely loves them, and absolutely raves about her prose. So again, more beautiful writing that is a draw for me. Now with Karen Lord, I absolutely am interested in picking up Redemption in Indigo, which is a fantasy retelling with like a Caribbean inspired mythology, I believe, or like god folklore stories, which is right up my alley. But I would also be interested in picking up some of Karen Lord's more sci-fi works. I've heard, at least from Angela's channel, that it tends to be a bit more like optimistic, speculative sci-fi, which is a genre that I would really like to try more of. So often lately, I feel like I'm missing out on books that could absolutely be new favorite reads for me because they are like labeled or a genre that doesn't necessarily appeal to me or that I think doesn't appeal to me. However, There are times when I am like kind of forced or where I happen to pick up books for very specific reasons, usually book clubs or like a really, really strong recommendation within those genres, that then it totally catches me off guard and I feel like I absolutely fall in love with that book. So because of that, I'm trying to like expand or push my boundaries with genres for a little bit here. I also feel like I've been in a bit of a rut. So I'm hoping that, like book-wise, so I'm hoping that kind of exploring other genres or new genres to me will help with like finding new books that are new favorites. So the one in particular that I've heard is like a really great optimistic speculative sci-fi is, what's it called? The Best of All Possible Worlds. So both that and Redemption and Indigo sound interesting to me. If there are other Karen Lord book recommendations or like another place within Karen Lord's back catalog that you think I should start first, let me know down below. And then that does bring us to the last author that I have on this list, and that is N.K. Jemisin. Now, every time I hear someone talk about an N.K. Jemisin series, whether or not it is the Broken Earth series, the Inheritance trilogy, or the Dreamblood duology, I always think, man, like that sounds so interesting. I also consistently hear that their writing is absolutely so beautiful and well written. So why haven't I picked up one of their books yet? Well, it absolutely has to do with the fact that pretty consistently, I feel like the general consensus for where to start with N.K. Jemisin is to read the Broken Earth series. And that one has always been a little bit of an intimidating read for me because everyone talks about how confusing or complicated it is, or how they're just like not smart enough to get it. And that has always put me off or like made me a little bit worried or afraid to pick it up and to try that series. But last year I kind of decided like definitively that I was going to go for it. And that's because of a review for the series by Leanna from the channel Leanna's Library, who kind of said like, you're not supposed to get all of it, like that's okay. And just the way that she described it made the book feel so much more approachable. Same thing at the time, I was absolutely loving A Chorus of Dragons series, which is also very consistently described, even by myself, as really confusing and a little bit complicated, and that I don't always get it. And I found that I really enjoyed that experience and I was absolutely okay with not getting everything. So basically when I had that realization, I decided I was finally going to pick that book up. The Broken Earth trilogy is one of my priority series for this year, so I'm hoping to get to the first book, which I think is the 5th season, very shortly. Okay, those are the 6 authors that I wanted to talk about today, of authors where I want to read more books from them. Let me know if any of these authors, you have read a bunch of their books, you have recommendations on where I should start. Let me know down below. Also, let me know an author that you would like to read more of, whether or not it's an author you have or haven't read anything from them before and you just want to read more. Okay, I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye.